We have Madolche, yeah, RIP only one Herald of Orange Light. We also have Ishizu, Good Stuff Naturia, and we have some Pendulums for you today as well. You guys smash the crap out of that subscribe button so you guys don't miss out on more awesome content. I was actually very happy to see somebody come up with something Madolche related here post list, and I've heard constant massive Madolche players that have been just absolutely devastated by the loss of Herald of Orange Light. And I agree, this is one of the best cards that this deck had going for it for defensive options, and they cleaned up Madolche of all things on the list because they didn't want to go after cleaning up these cards. Very interesting choice at the end of the day. That Gamma still runs around at 3, but we have Herald of Orange Light at 1. So we have 2 copies of Bysteel Drillsworm, triple copies of Magna Nut, triple copies of DD Crow, still amazing hand trap. We have 1 Herald of Orange Light, 2 copies of Fenrir, with 2 copies of Keldo. We have triple copies of Angeli, with 1 copy of Hoot Hoot Don't Pollute, 2 copies of Messengelato, triple copies of the Pudding Susior, 2 of those with 1 Pudding Cess. Still, even with all of this, you still only play 1 Pudding. We have triple copies of Mudora, 1 copy of the Awakening Forest, triple copies of the Flourishing Hills, and then we got triple copies of the Duck. Do not underestimate the Duck. We have 1 Chateau with triple copies of Pot of Prosperity, triple copies of Infinite Permanence, and 1 copy of Promenade. No Madolche ticket anymore, just straight, not even worried about it. Extract Dinner, you have triple copies of Fresh to Start, triple copies of Glass Filet, we have triple copies of Tiaramisu, triple copies of Shock Lala Mode, and we have 2 copies of Sky Thunder, and 1 Abyss Dweller. So deck here you have triple Lava Golem, 2 copies of Cosmic Cyclone, triple copies of Hadouken, with 1 copy of Harpy's Feather Duster, triple copies of Dimensional Barrier, and triple copies of Evenly Matched here, wrapping up your Madolche take for the block. And like I said, I think there's a lot of cool stuff to mess around with for this deck, and by any stretch of the imagination, I think that this deck is relatively far from being beaten by a ban list. Next up here is Naturia, Good Stuff. Yes, you still do have your Ishizu package in here, but full disclaimer, I mean, who really cares about that at the end of the day? One thing I do like about this build is we are actually playing the Exchange of the Spirits. As gimmicky as this card actually is, it is absolutely hilarious to see that this card can actually, do its job and actually ruin people's day. So it is very interesting. Now, obviously, as a list will shift here in the future, you will see these Herald of Orange Lights get pushed down to 1. All right, that'll be a big shift here from like you just saw for our previous list here. I do think that a deck like this will be able to survive with this. They were talking about in the video switching these up for Herald of Green Lights, so that is something relatively interesting to mention here for this to stay legal going forward. So we have 2 copies of Agido, 1 copy of Drillsworm, triple copies of Magna Nut with triple copies of Herald of Orange Light, soon to be 2 green. We have triple copies of Fenrir with triple copies of Kelbeck. We have triple copies of Keldo with triple copies of Mudora. And we have triple copies of Camellia, triple copies of the Mole Cricket, 1 Stink Bug with 1 Sunflower. We have triple copies of the Duck, 2 copies of Blessings with 1 1-for-1. We have 1 Upstart Goblin, 1 Exchange of the Spirits, 1 Gravekeeper's Trap, and 2 copies of the Sacred Tree. And then we have 1 Unicorn with 1 Cerberus, with 1 Asa, 1 Axis Machine with 1 Utopia Prime, 1 Dugar's the Timeless with 1 Baguska. We have 1 Utopia with 1 copy of Silent Arc, 1 Cowboy with 1 Zeus, 1 Dweller with 1 Ching Ying, 1 Naturia Beast, and 1 Naturia Barkion. Then we have 1 Drillsworm with 1 Pankratops, 1 Bamboo Shoot, 1 Called by the Grave, triple Dark Hole, triple Dark Ruin No More, 1 Harpy's Feather Duster, 2 Lightning Storm, and 2 copies of Talents here, wrapping up your Sacred deck. Next up here is Pendulum. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, it's exciting to see Pendulum Magicians actually perform. To be honest with you, this obviously the Adagnister or the Draco Slayer build kind of feels a lot better at the end of the day for the more modernized stuff. I do think that kind of going forward that you can see maybe possibility of playing either build and having success with it, but Pendulum Magician not really caring anymore. I think that's a big win out here in terms of generalized innovation and evolution for this deck. So we have triple copies of your Black Fang Magician, triple copies of Double Iris, triple copies of Harmonizing Magician with triple copies of Fenrir. We have triple copies of Oath Dragon, with triple copies of the Performance Palace Celestial Magician, triple copies of Pendulum Sorcerer, with triple copies of Skullcrabat. We have triple copies of Purple Poison, with 1 White Wing Magician. We have triple copies of Wisdom Eye, with 1 Dragon Pit. We have triple copies of Duelist Alliance, with triple copies of Pendulum Call. We have triple Pot of Prosperity, with 1 Star Pendulum Graph, and 1 good old Time Pendulum Graph here, wrapping up our main deck for Pendulum. Now, there actually you got 1 Selene with 1 to Hark, 2 copies of Beyond the Pendulum, 1 Apollosi with 1 Access Code, 1 Tornado Dragon with 2 copies of Time Star. We have 1 Supreme King Dark Dragon Rebellion with 1 copy of the Perform Mage Trapeze Magician. We have 1 Baguski with 1 Evil Swarm Nightmare. We have 1 Abyss Dweller, and we have 1 Baron de Flor. Then we have triple copies of Dimension Shifter, triple copies of Dark World No More, triple copies of Lightning Storm, triple Talents, and we have triple copies of Evenly Matched here, wrapping up. Honestly, this is very interesting. I don't know. I don't have much other thoughts. It's just kind of cool to see other Pendulum decks kind of creeping out of the woodwork here and getting the chance to function, which is amazing. Next up is more Sky Striker. Now, Striker, for this deck, I've said the same thing a couple of videos here. I've been looking to see what innovations that Striker players are bringing to the table. You know, what is going to let this deck, you know, survive post, you know, Mystic Mind going away, because Mystic Mind was one of the craziest linchpins that this deck had holding it together in the competitive scene. But there are ways. Duelists are, it's doing its job, all right? You definitely see Raigeki being one of those replacement cards to kind of hold things together. Also, this build is only focusing on 1 linkage, which is actually kind of impressive at the end of the day. So, we have triple copies of Ash, Blossom, and Joyous Spring. We have 1 Pinkertups with triple copies of Effect Veiler. We have 2 copies of Ghost Bell. We have triple copies of Ray with 2 Rose. We have 1 copy of Hamp. So yeah, we were actually main decking the Kaiju monster. We have 1 Called by the Grave with 1 Offerings to the Doomed. 2 copies of Paw of Desires with 2 Raigeki. We have 1 Rhoda with 1 Area Zero, 1 Afterburners with 1 Eagle Booster, 1 Hornet Drones with 2 copies of Shark Cannon. We have triple Wado Anki with 1 copy of Multi-Roll. We have 1 copy of Good Ol' Engage, 1 Linkage with 1 Terraforming. We have 2 Talents, and we have triple copies of Infinite Permanence, wrapping up your main deck. Down here, they actually get 2 Zeke with triple copies of Shizu, 1 Kaina with triple Kagari, 2 Hayate with 1 Selene, 1 copy of Nightmare Unicorn, 1 to Hark, and 1 copy of the Axis Machine. And we're still playing triple copies of Space Rock, 1 Harpy's Feather Duster, triple Twin Twisters with 1 Upstart Goblin, actually citing the Upstart, that's hilarious. We have 2 different Dimension Grub, 2 Ripple Dimensional Barrier, and 2 copies of Trap Trick here, wrapping up your Sky Striker deck. Shout out here to having 5 copies of Dimensional Barrier present in your deck. Well, just call Fusion and you'll be in a very good position to take the game. And the last we have for you guys here is Sword Soul. I was wondering how Sword Soul was going to, how to evolve. This deck has relied on Mystic Mind for so long in its lifespan, and it's actually kind of sad to say that, you know, we needed that generic staple card for so long that so many players have just looked at this deck and they're like, you know, it's not doing its thing. Well, when Sword Soul creeps through the woodwork and actually shows us that, hey, you know, this deck can still perform, I'm all in. So we have triple copies of Mo Yi, triple copies of Long Yun. We have 1 Tai with triple copies of Incredible Ecclesia. We have triple copies of Ara Ara, triple copies of Ashuna. We have triple copies of Vishuddha. We have 2 copies of Jerusalem. Triple copies of Magna Hut with 1 copy of Heavenly Dragon Cycle. Triple copies of Emergence with 2 copies of Pod Desires. We have 2 Talents. We got triple copies of Forbidden Droplet with 1 Called by the Grave, triple Infinite Permanence, and we have 1 Blackout. Down here in the extra deck, we got 1 copy of Wollo, 1 Shaman with triple Monk. You got 1 copy of your End Punisher with your 1 Draco Berserker, 1 Baron with 1 Cheng Ying with 1 Yazi, 2 copies of Boxium, 1 Sovereign, and 2 copies of Chi Zhao here, wrapping up your Sword Soul deck for what's to come going forward here. So, what do you guys think about these decks? Please leave a comment down below. Tell me what you guys think. If you guys have had any success as well, feel free to reach out to me. I love the chance to see some of the ideas the players coming up with. I'll see your beautiful faces back here later today, guys. Peace out. friends. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.